Super duper. Okay, so thank you all for deciding to join us again on this Thursday show that we put out each week. What we've decided to do is to run this one about Automation 101, if you like. So getting started with the CatDV worker, and we're better to get started than handling some inbound media and automating how to get content into CatDV. So just a quick note, actually, we've been running our CatDVU training program for many years now, I think 8 or 9. And we've gone around the world and we've delivered it many tens of times and had a really cool time in many of the best cities that Europe and the States have to offer, and met some cool people face to face and had some really cool times. So we are really disappointed not to be able to do that this year with lockdown in 2020. But at the same time, we know that there is an audience that is hungry for information about how to use CatDV better, and we know it's a differentiator as well, that we can almost self-serve and learn how to do this stuff ourselves. So I'm no longer technical, but I can make the worker run and set up automations myself, which is not true of many platforms in our business space. So this is the first. As you can see, we've got to hear a draft agenda for the kind of topics that we anticipate covering in some of these CatDV education sessions using the CatDVU syllabus. We can see there's a pile of stuff around automation. We're handling simple ingest. In this one, we want to be able to handle more complex ingest and multi-track audios, AI, and all of that. Some stuff about media movement, true policy-based archiving, so based on status and approval rather than just on dates, which is what storage can do on its own. Some stuff on review and approve, and then some troubleshooting tips and tricks. So there's a pile of stuff about automating with CatDV we think and we know is interesting, because we keep getting asked to do that kind of training for our customers. There's then a set of content around scale and platform, and we might decide to run these for smaller groups so there can be slightly more interaction, but things like hardware, setting up deployments of CatDV in virtualized and Docker containerized environments, being able to work with large worker farms across multiple locations, as well as being able to secure CatDV, particularly for internet hosted or internet facing applications. And then thirdly, a class of applications, because CatDV is a platform, it's not just a MAM, PAM, DAM solution. It's a platform that can be extended. So being able to use some automation in the user interface to change behavior, both in our desktop and web clients. Being able to automate things using JavaScript, so we can make it do things we haven't even conceived of. And then building custom user interfaces. So CatDV can be completely customized. So if you don't like, or you want to create a custom project management tool or a custom review and approve tool, then that can all be done using our APIs and interfaces. So these are the kind of topics that we plan on covering in these reasonably bite-sized chunks. I do want to do a quick call out for what we're going to do today, and we're going to try something new as well. So you might know, after our webinars each week, we put a You Can Book Me out. So you can book a one-to-one with somebody in the CatDV team to talk about the cool stuff that we presented on our Thursday show. This week, if you want to get some free training, free support for an hour with one of our support engineers, then book yourself in, and you can follow along this webinar, see if you can do some of these things yourself. And if you have any queries or follow-up that you'd like to do, then look out for the You Can Book Me link, and you can book an hour with one of our trainers and one of our support engineers, and they'll see if they can help get some of your cool workflows going, because we are never arrogant about what CatDV worker can do and what you need it to do. So we'll probably learn something as well. Okay, so I think that's basically my introduction. I'm not doing too much today. You'll be pleased to hear. I'm joined, very lucky to be joined by Brian Charlie, who is one of our workflow consultants, responsible for some of our most major deployments and knows CatDV amongst the best in the world. And so very pleased to have him with us. And Brian is going to take us through Automation 101. And this is the kind of content we're going to look at. So a bit of an introduction to the worker, how to set it up, and then some simple inbound media processing workflows, indexing stuff, watching for files arriving, moving them around, and then triggering actions. So it's fairly straightforward. For those of you that know CatDV well, there may be There's nothing new in here, but we do think there's some folks that would really benefit from this, and we've been asked to do this kind of content. So yeah, we think it'll be an interesting addition to our library of webinars after the event. As Sam said, the recording will be up, so if you do want to follow along, you can pause the video and try the stuff out for yourself before then booking up your You Can Book Me for any things that are troublesome. So I'm going to hand over at that point to Brian and stop my share and let you take it from here.
Great. Thank you very much, Dave, and thanks everyone for joining us today. It's really exciting to have an opportunity to just sort of give a solid introduction to the worker node. Now, some of you may already use CatDV. You might already use the worker node, but I think for everybody, it can always be realized as a more useful tool than it's even used for in some cases. So first, to understand the role of the worker node in CatDV, I'm going to just share up my screen here. We need to understand, well, first, where are we starting from? CatDV itself, and I'm assuming Dave, Hannah, we're good on the screen share?
Yes.
Excellent. CatDV itself provides a scalable, powerful database server and desktop client, web clients, installed panel and integration-based clients to do what? Enter metadata and various data information into that server, search, tag, collaborate, and especially with a desktop client, which many of you may be familiar with. I mean, it's pretty powerful. You can do transcoding, you can ingest footage into the system. It's great. The thing is that, especially in professional situations when it comes to things like post-production houses, news facilities, even medical facilities, when you're processing all sorts of footage, there are repetitive tasks involved, right? Things like indexing media, making sure it's named properly and actually goes to the right place on shared storage, things like proxy generation, and handling those sort of repetitive tasks that you'll always need to do, things like media analysis and maybe some automatic metadata tagging along the way. And so, as powerful as the software itself is, wouldn't it be great if there was an extra component we could lay on top that was almost like a salaried employee that just sits there and looks at your CatDV server and looks at your file system and local network, even looks at the cloud for you and performs basic tasks or advanced tasks based on what it sees. And the worker node is exactly that. It is I guess in a sentence, it's a chauffeur for your media management tasks. So the worker runs, and we're going to use this engine analogy as we go. It runs sort of like an engine in that you define some workflows within the worker node, and it runs them either on intervals or now using this wonderful new notification system in CatDV, just whenever the conditions are right on the CatDV server for that. Similar with this engine analogy, the best deployments of worker nodes are those that are well maintained, well oiled, having a human being involved, really thoughtfully laying out the tasks and workflows and managing operation of it. So, without much further ado, I'd say let's head in and look under the hood in worker node itself, right? Actually, sorry, there is some more ado. Forgive me for correcting myself there. I think we should just show a workflow. So worker node, as I said, it watches for conditions or triggers on the system. So what constitutes a trigger? Well, there's all sorts of stuff, and we'll get into it, but the very most basic thing is some sort of a metadata trigger or a query on the CatDV server, like this box, check me, is checked. So we could say, okay, worker node, go do some stuff when that box is checked. So we'll go ahead and save that up to the server and see what happens with our worker. We get the little notification and, oh, look, the result says box was checked, and there's the current date and time. That's pretty cool. So how does that work? Well, let's go into the actual worker node itself. There we can see we have this nice little task manager. Maybe we'll come back and look a little more at how this works, but there's the task that ran, and we know it ran because we saw a result. But let's jump into the config editor and look at how such a workflow might be built. Just loading up the config editor. Here we go. So we'll make this a little bigger. It's worth mentioning just before we dive into the workflows themselves that the worker nodes can be installed in instances across your organization. And then those instances can have processes added to them if you want to have worker working on 2, 4, 6, even 20 tasks at a time. So the amount that they scale is really up to you, how they're deployed across the organization. But when installed, they can be run as sort of an app or a background service, like I've got it configured here. So it sort of starts with the system, like the CatDV server. Since we're on this tab, I should point out that with our Pegasus worker product, you can manage multiple workers over the web admin interface and via Pegasus Worker Manager. And once we go through the basic workflows, we'll probably have a peek there as well. So there's a few options along the way for, which server is this worker going to pair it to. You can set up things like email notifications, so you have an email account that the worker can send emails from. And of course, on the licensing tab, you can put in for how many processes you want your worker node to run. But the real nuts and bolts are here. And this is where we edit our watch definitions or worker jobs. So as you can see here, I've got tons of jobs, but I want to focus in on the one that we just ran. And actually, we have a text-based list if you have a lot of jobs like me. So there's this hello world action. So let's just sort of break this down. What happened there when I checked that box? Well, in the very, very first step of a worker action, you see here we have this sort of flow chart. And so this is where you define, what is this job, basically. So we give it a name. You can give it a description, which is really handy for if other people are going to work with this workflow to sort of describe loosely what it does. And we can set all sorts of things like priorities to make the certain workflows take precedence over others, limit the number of tasks that can be run, when they can be run, how long they can run. There's all sorts of options here. And it's with any workflow, it's worth having a good look here and maybe trying a couple combinations of things to see what makes the most sense. But in this case, it's a pretty simple action. Let's go with the defaults. So I was telling before that worker actions run on triggers. And so this trigger type is the server query. And that what it will do is anytime this query is true, it will either get a notification from the server or it will check at whatever interval you put there just to sort of catch up and make sure in case it missed a notification. And this query, oh boy, it's dead simple, isn't it? This is that this check me box equals true. And when a box is checked, it equals true. You have true for a checkbox, false for an unchecked box. That's pretty simple. So what does it do when it sees that? Well, it enters that clip into the workflow. So in this case, we're doing a really simple thing. We're going to use some steps that are available from this list here on the left. So anyone who's familiar with worker node, probably already knows that these steps are various actions that can be used alongside and with each other to build out workflows. Things like copying, moving, and deleting files, transcoding, metadata export, certain thing, testing for file existence, setting metadata fields. You can even actually execute your own custom JavaScript or a system command if you've got like a batch script or a shell script that you'd like to run. So the options are pretty much endless. And if that wasn't enough, I know I went over this in a prior webinar, but you can get these plugins for your worker node that add these additional steps to things, connect it to Google or Amazon AI or perform archiving actions using our server-based archiving plugins, Dropbox, Sony C, all sorts of things. It really goes on. And it's important to know that you can build your own using tools that come out of the box with every CatDV system. So it's a bit more of a worker 301 or 101 or a million and one, but the understanding that what worker can do is only limited by what you want to define it to do. So in this case, we're starting quite simple. We're going to set this clip field called result, and that was this guy back here, right, result, that the box was checked at, well, hold on a second, what's that $_I? That's the time. Hold on, what does that mean? Well, we have some really cool variables available in the worker. Now, when I was first starting out with CatDV, this was almost 10 years ago. Can you believe that day? I was not as familiar with certain programming languages like I am now. And the thing that really attracted me to it was it allowed me to still do things that you would normally need to write code for, but it gave me the tools to do them in a point-and-click interface. So in this case, if I were to open up my little help menu here, what Worker offers whenever you've entered a clip into the workflow are some automatic variables. And you don't need to be a programmer to understand what these mean. You can get things like, if you use $I, well, that's the path of the file that triggered the action. If you use $Q, well, that's the parent folder of the file that triggered the action. And so you can use these little components to build out things like results or file paths, as we'll see in a little bit. And in this case, what I'm using is right at the bottom here, this $_I just gives us a timestamp. So isn't that handy? You can just pop in this little variable anywhere you need in the CatDV worker text field, and it will expand that expression for you without any programming knowledge necessary. Now, for the people who do have a little bit of that knowledge, and hey, if I can learn it, anyone can, right? You'll notice here we've got a couple of regular expression-related tools. So, the short of it is, without keeping this as worker 101 as possible, you can use regular expressions in line with any of these expressions here on the platform. So we could do a string replacement on that if we wanted to. And there's some pretty cool tools in here to test evaluations and matches of regular expressions. So anyone who's done any programming in other contexts, regular expressions are really powerful, sort of a common ground for expressing things in different languages. So check out the tools. It's cool. Anyways, let's get through this workflow. So another important thing is that when we enter a worker workflow, we enter it based on a trigger. And we want to make sure that by the time we exit that workflow, that trigger isn't in the same state, because then there's a chance we could create a loop. And I think we all understand the concept of an infinite loop, right? So if this workflow is based on me checking a box true, then if the workflow is successful, we should probably uncheck the box and make it false. So that's exactly what we do. So the box is checked, we fill out the field, uncheck the box, and we finally publish the changes to the server. Now on here, you can just publish the changes where they are. We could also say, don't publish the changes if it's doing something unrelated to the server, or maybe we want to move or copy to another catalog, or maybe the last result is that we delete the clip from the server altogether. It's up to you. Anyhow, that's how we build that hello world action. Now, Dave said that this webinar was about file ingest. So what are we doing talking about server queries? Well, I think it's important to note that a file ingest action, the existence of the file, well, that's the trigger for the action. So let's look at how that same sort of thing applies in a file watch scenario. So when you go to create a new worker action or watch definition, you start by choosing the sort of root type that you want. And the basic difference is you've got things that can watch for files, new files on your local system. They can watch on at a cloud location like Amazon S3 or Backblaze B2, or an FTP location as well. And when it sees those files enter the worker action, right? So a watch folder based action would be, let's see here. This is our basic watch folder action, where we're watching on our SAN an ingest folder. And we want, when people drag stuff into that ingest folder, we want to automatically organize it in CatDV, make it available, and then maybe we want to trigger another action that'll do a thumbnail and a proxy. So first I want to show this in action, and then we'll deconstruct sort of how it's all done. So I've got some water footage here, and we're watching this watch ingest folder. So I'm just going to drop water footage right in there. And I'm just going to step out of the editor for a second so that we can run this action. Sure, we'll discard our changes too. And so the action would run on whatever interval we specified when it's doing a file watch. But if you're ever using Worker to sort of manually run some automations, which is a funny statement, you can also trigger the actions to run right away. So we'll do that now. I'll say watch ingest folder. Oh, let's try that one more time. And there it is. So it found our files, and it's processing them, and it looks like it processed them and it handed them off to another action. So what's the result here in CatDV? Let's refresh our catalog tree. Well, I've made a route for all of those watch folder-based ingest called folder ingest, and then there's water footage. There's the file, the folder of footage that we dropped into CatDV. And if we look and see here, looks like they're just getting processed for thumbnails and proxies now. So you can see those thumbnails and proxies are starting to come in all automatically. So if you think about, what would a human have had to do to accomplish this versus just dragging it into a folder and letting CatDV Worker handle the job instead? And then you multiply that times maybe hundreds of clips being ingested by dozens of people a day. And geez, each instance, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that every CatDV worker instance is sort of like a salaried employee. They're really, really useful. So there
Well,
it is.
and just to overlay onto that, Brian, we have our customers. We have our customers telling us that it's not unusual for them to get a day back per week per creative person on their team, because they don't have to do a lot of this stuff themselves. And this kind of automation, simple as it may be, just to get stuff into the system so you can start to engage with it, find it, is a big way of saving a lot of time and therefore a lot of cost.
Yeah, definitely. So let's take a look at what this action actually did. So I'm going to, actually, it's worth noting that when a worker task is completed, you can actually pop into the task itself. So, I mean, in this case, everything's all green lights because, hey, this is a demo. But in reality, things will fail. Say you submit a PDF to a proxy workflow that's expecting a video file or something, although we can handle that too. But here it gives you this quick overview of what the action did, some important stats about when it ran. You can access the log file if you'd like, and the debug snapshot is really, really critical. If you're ever submitting a support ticket to do with a worker node task, you always want to include that debug snapshot, which just sort of packages everything up. So just we'll maybe take another peek at the task viewer, but I want to unpack this task that just ran here. So we're going to go back into the config editor, and we're going to find our watch folder ingest action. So this is, again, just another pretty normal action. In this case, we're checking that folder every 40 seconds for files which are at least 1 second old. And the reason for that is in this case, we don't want to pick up files while they're still growing or being written to the directory. However, if you're using one of the codecs that we do support for growing files, this actually becomes a really cool way to ingest stuff to CatDV while the files are still being recorded. And to do that, you just set the settle period to 0 seconds. So it's a bit of an aside. So let's fly down what this action is doing. So it sees the files in the folder, and we have a file condition step available. And what that basically lets us do is, before worker acts on anything, to do some basic filtering of what's coming into it. Because, in the, especially, I mean, I have a lot of background in post-production world. As much as we try to keep everything super neat and organized, there's going to be some garbage or cruft along with our projects. So in this example, we want this job to only take known media file types. We don't want it to just take every single file because maybe we just want the media. But we can choose a few, high-level categories, or we can additionally drill down by creating specific inclusions and exclusions. So as this example, let's say we have every project has a bunch of dockets called My Job in it, and maybe we don't actually want to index those dockets in this CatDV context. So I can just add that to the exclude list there, and it'll skip it. It's pretty cool. You can specify a minimum file size. There's some contents requirements there. And hey, it wouldn't be CatDV if you couldn't flip the whole thing into regular expression mode as well for more advanced filtering. Okay, so we filtered our file types. The first thing when we import a clip to CatDV is to perform some kind of media analysis on it. And that's where we get all that rich, juicy technical metadata, your format and codec, your audio channel configuration, bit rates, burnt-in EXIF or IPTC metadata. That's where that media analysis does that. And for the most part, with any known media file type, you're going to get all that info available in CatDV automatically. So, in the spirit of automatic, we can say import automatically, just figure out what it is and do your best. Or if we know exactly what we're going to feed the action, we can tune it specifically to import just a certain file type. There's a few other options here. You'll notice that I've said not to make thumbnails, and the reason for that is because I want to show you how one action can hand off to another. And this will make a little more sense once I show you the other action. But basically, that one handles thumbnail generation, so there's no need to do the work twice. So anyways, we do media analysis. And so with a traditional watch folder-based action, the trigger is the file being in the folder, right? And as was the best practice I said before, you don't want to have the trigger still be the same at the end of the action. So any traditional watch ingest action, we want to move the file to a permanent storage location on the SAN somewhere. So in this case, we can build out a destination path for where that file goes. And so this might look like a bunch of gobbledygook to some of you. It sure does to me. But remember, if we go back into our little variables thing, this can start to make a bit of sense. I want to put it in my CatDV media folder, which is an organized folder that my human employees cannot go in and mess around with media. And then I can use these variables to put it in a folder for the year, the month, the date, and then capital T is the current time. And now you see all this stuff next to that is, well, the capital T gives us the time with hours, minutes, and seconds, but I just want it with hours and minutes. And this is just a little example that we can take that regular expression and change the variables on the fly as we need. And then that $R just says, if I dragged in a folder called ice cream to create that in the path as well. So let's look back at that file that it moved. We ingested that water footage, right? So it went into what? CatDV, CatDV Media, 2020, 06, 18, 1221, water footage, and there it is. So that level of organization, again, imagine you've got dozens of people dragging in from all sorts of places, all sorts of files. Only some sort of automation engine could handle that sort of organization at scale. So that's pretty cool. The last part of this is that we set a clip field, which is actually a trigger for another worker action. The idea being that if you set up your actions thoughtfully, you can reuse certain actions to work in more than one condition, and you can have one action sort of seamlessly feed into the other. Like we saw, it indexed the stuff, it moved it, and then it automatically handed it off to our next proxy action. Finally, when we publish on the action, we say the catalog that it's going to, and we can use variables there too. In this case, we're saying take the parent folder from the root of where the worker was watching. So in that case, it did the water footage. So that is, an overview of a basic folder ingest or file ingest. Now we have another type of file watch action, and I'm sort of looking at the clock here because that took a little longer than I had hoped because I'm so long-winded. But we have another type of watch action called a quick folder scan, and I'm going to sort of fly through this. The idea of the quick folder scan is, okay, maybe we don't want to move or rename the files that we want to detect. And so it's great if you've got, maybe finished assets, maybe a folder of stock footage, or completed projects that you want to index in CatDV but leave where they are. So let's run a quick watch folder sync. I'm going to grab another piece of sample media here. Let's grab some finance content, have a little fun. Watch folder sync. So the difference here is that this action, watch folder sync, is only going to do a quick scan of what's in this folder, make sure it's got an extension of a known media file type, and then set the status to awaiting proxy so that the other action that does analysis, thumbnail generation, and proxy picks it up from there. So this, putting the quick and quick folder scan, this could process a larger number of files in one fell swoop. So let's run that and see what the difference looks like there. So I'm just going to push it along with the run now. We're going to say watch folder sync. And we see 6 files, but it runs them and publishes them in one action. It doesn't move or rename the original files, but they still feed to that same proxy and analysis action in CatDV. So what's the result? My footage is in CatDV. It's getting those proxies and thumbnails as we speak. There they are. Thanks to notifications, they fly in real time. And I didn't have to reorganize anything on disk. So that's, basic difference between a regular file watch action and a quick folder scan. Now, I just want to check in with Dave. I've got one more thing to show you on the server query side. Dave, how are we doing?
This is all good. This is all good. I think the pace is good, and I'm sure our audience will tell us after the event if they disagree afterwards. So yeah, go for it. Keep going. I like it.
Good. Excellent. So we looked at, a couple of trigger types. We've got server queries. We've got file watch and quick folder scans. I mean, there was also, you can do a scheduled job, something that just runs on an interval. But the server query, once you've got, footage in your system and working, the server query is really sort of the main one you're going to be using. So here's a bit more of an advanced example of a server query-based action. So I call it the magic rename. Often you'll have, they have a saying, quality in, quality out. I think that's the nice version of the saying, right? So sometimes there's going to be unavoidable situations where footage gets ingested into the CatDV system, and maybe it's not organized correctly, maybe it's not named correctly. And so what a lot of customers opt for is a solution within the CatDV system itself. I know a few sports teams that do this. A solution within the CatDV system itself to be able to tag and then rename and reorganize that footage. So let's quit talking about it and let's do it. Let's say stacks of money. So what type of footage is this? Okay, it's some B-roll. The project name is Webinar Fun. The project number is 655321. Clockwork Orange tribute there. And here's a fun one. We're going to say, do we want to tell someone about this rename? And we sure do. I want to tell me about it, actually. And so the trigger for this action is this work your magic checkbox. So I'm going to run the action. We'll see what the result is. And then we'll take a look at how the action was built. And oh, it looks like I got an email here. Well, I'm sorry for working during a webinar, but I really should read this email. Oh, it's from my worker node. Hi there, I see that a clip of footage type B-roll named Stacks of Money. Oh yeah, cool. Here is the original path and the new path. Hey, that's pretty cool. How do we do this? Let's take a look. Well, first I want to look and see that it went where it said. Magic rename, there's my practice one, and there's webinar funds. We put the project name there, the media category, and then there's the asset with the project number and the date of ingest appended to it. And so this isn't just what CatDV does. This is what I wanted CatDV to do. And so if you see this and you can imagine this, well, I would like it a little bit tweaked this way or that way to work for my organization or my workflow. It's entirely possible. And everything you're seeing here is built with the point and click tools. So moving it along, let's see how this was built. So I'm going to go back into my worker config editor. And what did I call this one? I think I called this a magic something, magic file rename, right? So again, we start from a server query where work your magic equals true. So that's that checkbox. The first step we use here is called the set variable step. And that basically means if we've got some complicated expression, which we're going to review what this is in a second, instead of having to enter it in multiple places throughout the action, we can just sort of assign it to be called, well, in this case, new path, because we're going to use it in a couple of places. So set variable is pretty cool. So what is that variable? Well, we want to figure out, based on the information the user entered in CatDV, where is this clip going to be copied or moved to? So in this case, we can use this syntax, the $sign with curly braces, and then the unique identifier of the field to pull out that field value. So in that case, we want to move it to this root folder, this field value, which is the name of the project, and then underscore, then the number of the project, a new folder, what's the footage type? That's where we saw the B-roll, masters, so on and so forth. And then we rename the file itself to append the original file name with the project number, and then the date, and then of course the file extension .mp4mov. So it does look a little overwhelming when you see it, but then especially using the help menus that are available right here to sort of decode the variables as you go, it kind of all makes sense. So okay, we've set our variable, and now we want to actually go ahead and copy that file. And so what's great is now that it's loaded in a variable, we can just say copy to new path. There's a few options for, if there's already that file there. Do we want to change the name? Do we want to fail the action? What do we do? And then options, what if the source file is missing? This one is important. This one says, do we want to update the record in CatDV to say this is where the file lives now whenever we do a copy or a move? So it's just, be aware of those actions and the outcomes that they'll have within CatDV. But here, we've set the variable, copied the file to that path, and then we uncheck the box. Remember, we want to remove our trigger. And then here we have a really powerful part of worker workflows, which is a conditional step. So in this case, we want to send an email, that cool little email I got, right? And this is how it's put together, but we only want to send it if somebody has actually entered in the box an email address. Now going back to that box, it's actually a regex validated box. And what that means, yes, I want to skip changes. What that means is that when we define that field in CatDV, we can create one of those little regular expressions to say, if this box doesn't match that, don't allow it to save, just throw an error. I had shown some more advanced things using the UI script in earlier webinars, but basically the idea is that someone could not enter garbage in this box and then have it try to save, because we would just see an error. So we know that if worker's getting something in that box, that it's an email address, and so we can say send the email to that value, whatever email address was entered there. We can use shorthand codes to get some of the built-in simple fields like the clip name. And then as you can see here, using those same variables that we were using and creating before, we just construct this email message, which, on the other end of it was really handy. So there's the sort of the template, you could say, using the worker variables. And then once this clip was triggered for that action, there's your output.
And you can start to see how these kind of workflows can be pretty easily extended. You could add another set clip field to clear out the tell someone field. So you could clear out the email address after you'd sent it if you wanted to. And then you can use these cool CatDV variables as well to pull out different bits of the file and folder name and save those into metadata in CatDV too. And that's one of the things that that we do pretty well, right? So if folks already have some logic in their folder structures, which we do here, there was some money footage and there was some water footage, right? We could pick that out and store that in metadata so it's immediately searchable without having, and you don't have to pay that kind of tagging tax, if you like, which is so horrid. And any tagging you've already done with file and folder name, we can pull out.
Yeah, and I mean, it's worth noting that any file path information, it gets indexed sort of in the database anyhow. So without having to instruct a worker to do any of that tagging, if I were to go in through something like one of the CatDV web clients, I should just be able to type water, and there you go. There's my water footage. Well, okay, this is a bit of a freebie because a lot of these are called water, but there's one called On the Rocks, which was in the folder water footage. So that, as Dave mentioned, you sort of get that tagging for free. Cool. So at this point, we've looked at building what the worker is, what constitutes a trigger, and how to build these various triggered workflows. The last couple of things I got on my list is to look at the transcoding capabilities of worker, just in a very light way. Is that we good to do a couple minutes on that, Dave? Thanks.
No, I think it completely is. So, as CatDV, we want to be the best proxy flipper in the world, and we think we have. If not that, then we must be damn close. So, and when we mean best, we mean the absolutely simplest to use, most flexible, fast, cost-effective proxy flipper in the business. So to not talk about it would be bad. Let's talk about it.
We're talking about it. So those ingest actions that I was showing before, they feed into this action, which goes ahead and creates those thumbnails that you saw in CatDV, and also builds out some proxies. And we've got a few types of proxies, which we'll talk about in a second. But what's really cool is, for your proxy action, you basically say, oh, I want my proxies to live here. And then from that folder, CatDV will recreate the relative path to that asset, which is great because, I've worked with a few media management solutions, and some of them actually require you to, register a proxy. And it's important to note that CatDV can use anything you want as a proxy, as long as it will play back. So in terms of working with proxies at relative paths, this is much, much nicer. It's also worth noting that we can use path mapping from the server. So if we were to pull in a path mapping step and then say use media stores, then if we've got a proxy location defined in our media stores, we don't even have to put this. We can just say star, and it will pick it up from those media stores. So that's pretty cool. So we're building a couple of types of proxies here. This first one is an H.264 proxy, and let's take a look at how that's set up. You can save some presets here. Here, let's make a new preset. So you pick a template. We have a few templates. The most common one would be this H.264 web, which is sort of your basic web playback proxy. And so you can start from a template and say migrate preset. And then here we get the advanced exporter. And if it doesn't look too advanced, then just click advanced here and now it's advanced. So this lets us do things like choose the wrapper for the output file. We can specify some advanced FFmpeg options if we want to control very, very specifically how the transcode goes. We can choose options for things like if we want to render out the audio waveform as a movie, which is pretty cool. Codec options, this is sort of your handbrake style encoding options where you can choose quality scale, if you want to deinterlace the clips, which codec you're using. There's probably a whole other series of webinars that could be dedicated just to this, but it's worth noting that towards the bottom, not towards the bottom, here up in the wrapper selection, we do support use of GPU accelerated transcode. So if you're on a system, especially with an NVIDIA GPU, you can really make your transcodes fly under multiple worker processes. So what else can this advanced exporter do? It can manage adding a slate if you want to have a sort of a pre-slate before the clip. You can burn in text. So if you wanted to say burn in something like the word proxy, which is what I've done on my proxies, just play a proxy. See down there in the bottom left, I just burn in the word proxy because I can. But you could also use those variables to burn in information from the clip. So, like the example that we've got here, you could put the name of the clip on to show that it's a proxy. You can burn in time code, watermark, and with the markers, I mean, gosh, again, it's such a whole other world, but you could burn in subtitles as well if you wanted. Finally, some audio settings. And so once you put it all together here, if you're a real nerd like me, you can actually see the exact command lines it's going to execute to do the various video, audio, and muxing through FFmpeg. And for those of you who are wondering, this isn't just a backend to FFmpeg. The advanced exporter itself has a lot of native encode and decode capabilities, some taken from Java itself, and then the SDKs of some of those advanced codecs we support, things like Red, ArrayRaw, Blackmagic, so on and so forth. So that it all rolls into one under this advanced export. So
and I think this is a great example of simple things are easy and hard things are possible. So we spent quite a lot of time there looking at the advanced panel, but the panel that I use is just, hey, just let CatDV get on with it. I just want an H.264 and use my hardware accelerator, please. And then CatDV will work out, well, is it Array, is it Reg, is it XGCam, is it P2, is it some DNX media, is it Prores? And it will work out how to make the best quality proxy or the best proxy that whose settings I've chosen based on that inbound stuff. And I know from looking at a lot of other products in the market that it can be really complicated to set up general purpose workflows in those products, whereas CatDV just makes those decisions. They can all be overridden. Easy things are easy, hard things are possible. But CatDV will make those cool decisions. And we do that for video, we do it for stills, we do it with audio, for audio waveforms, and we can do it with things like PDFs and AI as well, Illustrator files and all of that kind of stuff too. So,
yeah,
cool.
No, that's a good point, Dave. I sort of jumped in the weeds there. And it's worth noting that for most use cases for a proxy, just selecting the H.264 web is going to be enough for most people.
Yeah, and then let me just take over a little bit because I do that. So and this is an example of the complexity that we're hiding away. And in fact, this is out of date. We have this week. It's like buses. We've got 3 new formats that we're discussing with camera vendors that we are going to be adding in the coming weeks and months. And this is trying to. So what this table is showing is across Mac, Windows, and Linux and Docker, what formats we can make proxies from, and what formats we can hardware accelerated, and what formats we can render to. So we focus on making the best proxies as fast as possible from a range of things on as many platforms as we can. So we've got QuickTime mod containers over here. We've got MXF containers over here. We have image sequences, stills formats, other video formats, audio formats, and document formats. And you can see there's lots of green. And it grows every month. We have a set of folks that are just dedicated to the bits and bytes and the massive detail and complexity that there is in video formats, codecs, long ops, and all that kind of stuff. Over my head, but I know is really hard, but we do really well. So yeah, so that's just to kind of say, look, this is the complexity that we're hiding away that is makes your lives easier essentially when using the worker to do this stuff automatically.
Yeah, that sounds good. So really the only other thing to mention, I think, before maybe we go to notifications off, I thought, before we go to Q&A, because I see there's some Qs with some good As to them, is that in that action I was showing before, I was making 2 proxies. So what was that other proxy I was making? We have this H.264 proxy, and then we have another one called Film Strip. So what's the Film Strip? Well, in our new release of CatDV Server 9, we support this film strip proxy, which allows you to do this nice hover scrubbing over clips. We got a lot of requests, and hey, it just makes good sense to allow people to review what is inside of a clip faster. And so this can literally, you can sweep your mouse over. Not sure what the frame rate is like over Zoom, and it can show you that proxy type. And then the last thing I didn't show is that the worker can also be shown. Oh, I've got it disabled right now. The worker can be shown and controlled via the web interface if you've got a Pegasus worker. So all that tracking of jobs, you can just filter by which job. If you just want to see, okay, yeah, when did this job run and stuff like that. You can get all those via the web interface as well.
Yeah, and this is so cool. So look, we have some very large scale deployments of CatDV. I think our biggest deployment of CatDV in terms of worker has 96 worker nodes. So I think it's across 3 or 4 very large virtual machines, and they're running 20 or 30 processes concurrently each. Being able to monitor them all in a kind of single network control center style way is really important. And so we'd have lots of customers. Another big organization here in the UK has 13 sites with content being harvested and worker nodes in all of those locations. And being able to see all of the status of those workers, being able to feed and water them, and seeing how many things are going on. There's at the top right, you can see the task summary, how many jobs are queued, how many are complete. Do we have green lights? Are there some activities that are failing? All of that stuff is really important. Oh, okay, cool. And there's the worker manager that does that in the application as well. Very cool.
Looks like one of my workers is offline. Well,
there we go.
I mean, that's about all I've got to show. What do you think, Dave? Should we grab a couple of questions?
Yeah, so let me just do before we do questions, let me just, if I can head back over here and quickly share screen and do my plug before we do Q&A. So I did promise, teased at the beginning, that there is a You Can Book Me link. So you get your 3 hour of basic worker training with a one-to-one with one of the CatDV support engineers. And it's an experiment, so you might want to get in quick if you want to book one of these at catdv-worker.youcanbook.me, and you can book an hour with one of our support team, and they will try and help with any worker fun you have in the next few days. Next week's webinar, next Thursday, we have a webinar with Cloudian. So on-premise S3 object storage, pretty interesting. They've got some immutable workflows that prevent content being hacked. And with CatDV, of course, being able to put a great front end onto cloud and object storage as part of a tiered storage strategy, we think that we've got a pretty compelling proposition with all object storage, and in particular with Cloudian. So we're with them next week. And then that does bring us on to Q and hopefully A. So Hannah, would you like to help us out with a selection of the questions, please?
Yeah, of course. We've got quite a few that come in. So just a reminder, if you want to send them in, keep doing, but apologies if we can't get through all of them. And just a reminder, we have been recording this and we'll be emailing out a link so you can watch it back. So for those of you who've asked to see specific things again, you'll be able to play back the video, and like Dave says, you can pause it and try and do that on your own workers along with that. So the first question we have got, let me just start at the top. Can you place multiple file condition actions in a single worker action?
Currently, that is not a feature in the point-and-click interface. However, I would argue that for anyone who needs to consider multiple conditions or possible branches of different conditions, to use, instead of a conditional step, to use JavaScript. We've got a very accessible JavaScript API that can let you take 4 or 5 lines of code and accomplish what would require multiple conditional steps. However, we love feature requests, and I think that would be a good feature request to say, can we do multiple condition actions under one condition?
Yeah, and even better, and if you do want to talk to us about that, we'd love to listen. I like feature requests, but also what's the business benefit? So why do you want to do that? And is that the right way of solving that problem? That kind of discussion we love. So if you want to book, you can book me with the team. They'd love that conversation too.
I should correct my answer a little bit, because Don's question is, can you place multiple file condition actions in a single worker action? That you can do. I interpret it as multiple conditions under one, or multiple steps under one condition. So yeah, Don, go ahead. Put as many conditional steps as you want. Absolutely. That's easy.
Nice. So the next one, does the watch folder ingest work with CatDV Enterprise? What are the limitations with ingest over Pegasus?
Yes. Yes, it does. I believe with the enterprise version of Worker, we do extend the codec support. And Dave, keep me honest here.
Yeah.
But normally we require CatDV Pegasus for ingest of advanced codecs like Red, Blackmagic, and stuff like that. But I believe that all of our Worker nodes can ingest the same types of material. So
that's right. So yeah, so the main things you get with a Pegasus Worker is the ability to load balance. So we have a little tiny checkbox. Some of our best features are hidden behind the smallest little checkbox. But it allows the worker just to pick up the next job rather than picking up all the jobs and then slowly working through them. And if the worker's picking up the next job, you can have two workers. And that means that whichever worker comes free next will pick up the next job. It means you can build very resilient workflows, because if that worker goes away, this worker will keep processing the jobs it can. And it means that if a worker is particularly busy, the other one will pick up the load. So load balancing and resilience, you get a lot of that with the Pegasus Worker. You also get the REST API and the remote management with it. So it's really designed for those larger organizations or those larger deployments where you're going to have workers deployed in different locations. You might want to centrally manage, or particularly large-scale deployments of the worker. So that's what you get.
Great. So the next question is, are you able to transcode to ProRes LT without using middleware plugins or different software?
Yes.
Yes, we have an agreement with Apple to license their software, and so the code behind our ProRes decoder is the same code as behind anybody else's, to be honest, because they all license the same code, and we are in fairly advanced discussions about extending that so that we provide even more extensive support. Currently, we're okay to decode ProRes on Mac, Windows, and Linux. And we can also decode ProRes RAW, as well as the more traditional variants. And on Mac, we can make ProRes proxies as well. So in the kind of workflows we've been looking at, we've seen some raw media, master media coming in, and we've been making H.264 proxies, which is great for web viewing and such like. We can make mezzanine proxies as well. So your typical workflow, you might have an Avid DNX, or you might have a ProRes as your house format, or an XDCAM50 or whatever. And sometimes with some companion products, depending on the platform and depending on what time of the year you ask us, we have to use companion products. But we can also make those mezzanine files, and ProRes, being able to flip to ProRes, particularly on Macs, is already supported.
Excellent, thank you very much. Can the transcoder handle red? And second part, can you apply a LUT during the transcoding step? Yes
and no. I know. Actually, the devil is in the detail with this stuff. I think with red cameras, if there's a LUT on the camera, then we apply it when making proxies, and I think that's because we're using the code we license from red code, and I think we do for red apply the LUT that has been supplied to us. At the moment, we can't apply an external LUT, but it is a conversation that keeps on coming up, and frankly, we just keep a stack rank of priority order. We've just done Blackmagic RAW. We're working on Canon RAW. We have another couple whose legals aren't quite signed yet, which there's demand for. If you have a particular workflow with where you'd like to apply a LUT, then talk to us about it. And we like hearing about your business challenges, and particularly if it helps us to sell more CatDV, then that really focuses our mind on where the roadmap goes next.
Great. One more question about which files we can handle is, can we handle inbound DPP files?
I don't know about. So isn't DPP under the covers?
It's a package. It's a package. I think that's one where we would want to say that we could leverage something like Telestream Vantage to do that. What do you think?
Yeah. So DPP UK and European delivery formats. So I think it just uses format video and audio essences that we can completely handle as part of our set of media, because I think the audio's PCM, and there might be some, I don't remember whether it's OP Atom or whatever it is, but I know that we handle the essences, and then it's just a question of being able to handle the container. I think we've talked about it a few times and not yet got round to having it as a fully automated supported thing, but it would be an easy add if it was a real requirement. So do talk to us. Sales@squarebox.com or dave@squarebox.com. I would be very happy to have that conversation.
Fine, we know the person and we're talking to them, so I'll add that to our next chat.
Okay.
And then I said the last file support question. Somebody's asking where can they find the data sheet CatDV format support for proxy creation. I have just checked our website, it's not up there yet. But as Dave said, we've got 3 new formats to add, so as soon as that one's ready, we'll get that up on our website, and I'll make sure to take a note of your email address and send that across to you when it's ready.
Yeah, if you could send it out, Hannah, that would be cool. Yeah, I hadn't realised it wasn't up there, so we should add that. Yeah, good.
It's on my list. Oh goodness, they still keep coming in. So next question, how can I set the worker node to use my server GPU by default?
Well, that would probably be as simple as defining your default proxy action to use GPU encoding. What you want to make sure is that when you're using GPU transcoding, very briefly, it is not as efficient or accurate as CPU encoding, so it cannot handle the same wide range of inputs that we might be able to handle with a CPU-based encode.
Yeah, so let me just kind of go overlay onto that. So I think when you're choosing the proxy encoding engine out of that big list we saw earlier, you choose the one which is H.264 NVENC, and then that'll use NVIDIA encoding, and that'll use the NVIDIA card. We're currently working on some native implementations with things like Metals for Macs, because Macs don't ship with NVIDIA cards currently. And then we really do get, so when we get into is CatDV proxy creation hardware accelerated, we get into a whole world of complexity quite quickly, because every proxy flip has a decode stage. So we we have about 12 different decoders that turn image sequences, H.264, Prores, Avid DNX, and turn that into pictures. And then we have a encoder, and that encoder we use is FFmpeg, which is very fast and has a lot of support for NVIDIA CPUs using their CUDA APIs. And depending on what our partners have given us on the decode side will depend on how much GPU we can use to decode pictures. And depending on what the hardware is on the encode side, and whether it's NVIDIA or we support that particular graphics card, that'll determine how much GPU we can use on the way out. So do talk to us. We could put a question through to support, and we will try and talk more accurately about your specific thing, because we end up with quite a complex landscape between Mac, Windows, and Linux, the inbound formats and whether they're GPU accelerated, and then what you've got on the outbound side for actually writing the proxy.
Thank you. Next question, is there a way to get a proxy file with an alpha channel?
Absolutely. So I've worked with a few customers where they have some very, very specific requirements for the proxy files, and that's where that advanced options box comes in really handy. There's a couple of flags that can be set at the sort of FFmpeg level. It might just take a few minutes of figuring even, and you can get it exporting with the alpha channel. But I do not believe we have a point-and-click menu option for that. It's not a super common request.
Okay. Next question. In the demo, they didn't see any standalone audio files, so does CatDV only handle audio within video containers?
No, very robust. It can handle virtually any conceivable type of audio file, actually. It can do them standalone.
Yeah, and when we make proxies out of them, and thumbnails, we'll make a waveform thumbnail so that you get a sense of the loud bits and the quiet. And then if it's we also create a video proxy, so that when you play it in the web browser, you get a playhead and you get to see the waveform, amplitude waveform. And I think if you've got like a 5.1 thing, then we put some visualizations on it as well, which, I mean, if you start playing around with FFmpeg parameters, you can customize to your heart's content. So yeah, we handle audio reasonably well. Actually, we're always on the lookout for new audio workflows. So if you take a look at it and you find there are things that it doesn't do that you'd like it to, then particularly open to listening to your needs there.
Thank you. Next question is, can one Pegasus worker monitor other workers, and can you select which workers can be seen?
Ah, interesting.
So can one
So
at the moment, the monitoring technology is REST or the worker manager. So we happen to have the worker monitor web page built into the server because that gives us our web container. But you can monitor it from anywhere, and that's just a URL. So you can just choose that URL and go to it from wherever you are. Monitoring other workers, not currently, because the CatDV database is where all the action happens, if you like. So that's what we're really monitoring there. I'd be interested to know more about the question. Did you have a comment to make as well, Brian?
I was just going to say, to the question really that, when you configure a worker to be remotely managed, you can set a service password for that particular worker. So when you're setting up your Pegasus Worker Manager, it could look different user to user. Say you had two admins and you need these people to manage production and these people to manage marketing. You could hook up the production workers to one person's worker manager and the marketing workers to another. Yeah,
and you can certainly, it's maybe not quite the question, but if you've got a worker that can do 8 things at a time, you can do some quite sophisticated stuff by just say, okay, I'm only going to let 2 transcodes happen, 2 indexes, 1 MD5 analysis step. So you can do some kind of balancing there as well. That's not quite the question that was asked there, is it? But
anyway. Next question, can CatDV access watch folders in Azure Blob storage?
Yes, we can handle watch folders on SANS, NAS, or block-based storage. Anything that looks like a file system, we can handle those. That's kind of traditional CatDV storage workflows. And then recently, in the last year or so, or last 3 months, we launched the ability to monitor object storage as well. So anything that looks and talks like an S3 bucket, Backblaze B2 currently. And I think the other ones are kind of going to be built on demand. So things like Azure or Google Cloud Storage and such like. Tell us that you need them, and we'll build them.
Great. Well, I think that's all of our questions that we've had today. Like I said, we have been recording the video. So anything that you want to watch back, anything that you want to kind of try and do alongside, we'll be sending the link out hopefully tomorrow or first thing next week, so you'll be able to do that. Yeah, if you've got any other questions, send them into sales@squarebox.com and one of our team will get back to you. Or as Dave said, there's the You Can Book Me link, so you can book in for a session with our team next week, an hour to kind of troubleshoot your workflows. And again, the link for that will be on the mailer that you get, so you can click straight through to that booking thing. Otherwise, thank you all for taking time out today to join us, and we hope to see you again at one of our upcoming webinars in the next couple of weeks.
Very good. And just a reminder then, so if you do want to book one of those one-to-ones immediately, catdv-worker.youcanbook.me, where you can book is all one word. catdv-worker.youcanbook.me. Very cool. So thank you all for your time.
CatDV.